Hello, how are you? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I would like to share with you something that got into my mind just today reading an article. I would like to have a little short session where we could all discuss about how do we teach resilience, how do we face failure, and how do we support our students to face failure in their learning process. All this idea came after reading this very interesting article from the New York Times, an article written by Jenny Anderson, and the title is Learning the Right Way to Struggle. And when I saw the title, it really interests me because, as everyone else, I do have students who struggle in their learning process. Different kinds of struggles, basically, not because they're SEND students, but because they don't understand the topic or they find it difficult or whatever the other reason might be. And I was just thinking, how do I face this situation in class? Not only how do I support the student, but how do I teach them that struggle is actually something interesting and is part of the learning process. So these ideas that I'm going to share with you come basically from this article, but make also references to other authors. So the question that came to my mind while reading it were basically, how do we, and I say by we I mean teachers and students, how do we approach failure in our classrooms? How do we teachers approach failure when we learn something? Uh, with frustration? Do we see it as a challenge? Do we like failure? Is it something that, on the contrary, it just drags us down? How do we rebuild academic confidence if this is the case? And to what extent our students are fragile? Are they? Are they really fragile? Is it something that um, really affects their learning process? Is that fragility something negative? Or on the contrary, they're stronger than what we think? In any case, should teachers give clarity or create confusion, which the author called in the article cognitive wobble? What do we do in class? Do we see confusion as something positive? And what about what the article calls the learning mental states, where students go from being relatively comfortable to relatively uncomfortable to panicked? And then if it's the case, how do they face the panic? And then I would like to invite you to reflect on the last time you learned something, being riding a bike, being swimming, being whatever activity which we found complex at some point. Were we successful immediately? Were we successful right away? Or did we fail and we learned from it? So basically, the article goes around two ideas. The first one is the idea of the learning pit. And the second one is going to come after, which is the productive failure. And the learning pit is an idea from James Nottingham. And there's a picture there that I use quite often, not the picture itself, but the drawing of the learning pit is something that I have most of the time on the wall in my classroom. And then I invite students with sticky notes to go and tell me where are they in that learning pit, in that learning process. And I invite them to do that at the beginning of the lesson, and at the end of the lesson and the lesson after, so they can see the progression and they can see that there will be a dip. They will get to the bottom of the learning pit, but if they are resilient, they will be able to get out and improve the learning process. So basically the learning pit sorry, is a state of cognitive conflict where the students need to understand the fact that in each learning process they will experience several stages. So the idea is to invite educators, as Carol Dweck said, to, to share their struggles with intention to develop a growth mindset. So just think, do you use this principle in your classroom? Do you teach the students that they will at some point fail? They will get to the bottom of the learning pit and they will probably bounce back. Do you think it could be interesting to have the image of this learning pit in your classroom and use it in an interactive way? Do you think this could help you to measure progress, which is not always easy? Do you think it can be a visible thinking routine that helps you to um, understand where students are in the learning process? I don't know. Do you think that is a useful aspect to be taken into consideration? And the second bit is what we call the productive failure. So this is basically a design or designing conditions for all students to persist in finding a solution to solve a specific problem. So again, this is the one that how do you and your students confront failure? How do you encourage your students to fail? How many times you tell them, don't worry, you tried, that's very good, keep trying. How do you support them? How do you celebrate failure in class? Basically is how do you take into consideration the failure as a learning process, as a positive aspect of the learning that everybody goes through at some point. The idea is to share with you what Edison said, that many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. So again, two ideas that I wanted to share with you that I found extremely interesting from that article from the New York Times. And if you use any of these strategies in class, please share, let us know so we can just learn from each other. Thank you very much.